Hey, welcome to Scooby-topia. Remember the 80s TV movie trilogy of Scooby-Doo films? Of course you do, we all grew up with them, or at least knowing of them. These syndicated TV films were part of a programming block called The Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera, which ran from 1987 to 1988, with these 10 films being referred to as Hanna-Barbera's Superstars 10. Maybe you've heard of some of the others. It started with Yogi's Great Escape, The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, which I recently rewatched and also grew up with on VHS, Yogi Bear and the Magical Flight of the Spruce Goose, Top Cat and the Beverly Hills Cats, The Good, the Bad, and the Huckleberry Hound, Rockin' with Judy Jetson, and ending with Yogi and the Invasion of the Space Bears. You can probably find videos on a lot of these from many great Hanna-Barbera-based YouTube channels. Of course, we're here this time for the other three. Premiering October 18th, 1987, Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers was the first feature-length film to star Scooby-Doo, followed by Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, premiering October 16th, 1988, a year later, and Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf a month after that, November 12th, 1988. This trilogy would continue in the established style of Scooby during this era, a world where ghosts and monsters are real. Shaggy wears a red shirt, and Scrappy is a main character while the rest of the gang is absent. Sadly, no Daphne like much of this era had. The times where Scooby has real supernatural elements are definitely very different from the Man in the Mask narratives, which these films don't get to sport, and it seems most people prefer the more normal mysteries. But these films at least mostly have some better fun with the ideas than some of the other Scrappy era episodes, similar to the 13 Ghosts series being able to have a solid twist on the idea. It's funny that the thing people say about Zombie Island is that it was the first time the monsters were real, when the 80s had already been on that for a while. Results may vary, but still. When I was growing up with these films, I was blissfully ignorant that hating Scrappy was cool and so normalized, so I actually always liked his character, mainly knowing him from these, and was surprised so many people feel violent thoughts towards him, and I stand by his innocence here, which we can get into. Most of this series of films would be released on VHS soon after airing, allowing kids to grow up with them outside of TV airings as soon as possible, supporting releases from different companies and video lines like World Vision Home Video or the Kids Classic label. And for this trilogy, of course, the final and most common releases on VHS and DVD from Warner Bros. Home Entertainment, which is how I grew up with them. For nostalgia's sake, why don't we start with looking at how some of these home video covers evolved. For Boo Brothers, here are the first two VHS releases most people had. Both make sure to feature our three heroes of Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy accurately, as well as the titular Boo Brothers. Shaggy features his red shirt that he carried over from the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo series for these, and Scrappy is front and center. Not sure they really accurately represent the film itself, but they do their job. Now for the modern cover on the Warner VHS and DVD. I would say this actually does represent the film better, with a more accurate, visually dark and moody atmosphere, and the family jewels and grandfather clock even being prominent. Just a few things, such as Scrappy is no longer present whatsoever, only being mentioned on the back cover's description of the original issues, though he's now seen in the most recent pressings of the DVD that weirdly omit the original art for a screenshot. This all likely comes down to his popularity going down enough that hiding he was in the film made it easier to sell, much as I like Scrappy personally. Also, Shaggy is no longer accurately represented in his clothing, instead having reverted to his classic costume colors, and I suppose a nightcap? On to Ghoul School. Scrappy is now omitted from the front entirely, though Shaggy's costume is at least still accurate. The left is a little off, the school doesn't really look like Grimwood in the movie, but the one on the right is a lot better. You've got an accurate tease of the villain with the shadow, and the Grimwood girls are all present as well. The modern cover is still the best again for me though, even if the action taking place isn't necessarily accurate. Similar to before but worse, Scrappy is no longer even mentioned on the back cover, let alone seen. Even commercials and trailers as well as the DVD menu for the film by this point carefully make sure to not show that he's in this. Shaggy is also now inaccurately in his classic costume colors again. Lastly, for Reluctant Werewolf, we have a couple of pretty good cover designs. The left has some pretty solid art design of Shaggy's werewolf form, as well as some of the monsters, and the right from Turner features a nice representation of his transformation. They're a bit simple again, but do the job. For me, I'd say the modern cover wins again though. The boys are sitting in their car, which plays a major role throughout the entire film. Shaggy is mid-transformation, and our main antagonist Dracula along with the mummy lurk in the back. As for the cover art on the back though, you know the drill. No Scrappy, visual, or in text, or even on the menu. And of course, Shaggy is wearing his incorrect classic shirt instead, though he's weirdly wearing the correct red shirt on the back, and even on the insert. Shaggy's girlfriend Googie, we'll get into her later, isn't featured or mentioned on any of these three covers either, despite being a main character, which is certainly a choice. Which of these pieces of cover art for each did you grow up with, and which do you prefer for them? With that, why don't we look at these iconic entries in the franchise a little more closely, one by one. Let's kick off with Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers, which I previously referenced in my Americana video. I'll try not to repeat myself, so if you want a little extra, go watch that video if you haven't. I decided I actually don't want to keep talking about the Confederacy. Basically, this movie sees Shaggy's uncle has died and he's inherited his plantation mansion. I get into all that in the Americana video, so let's not drag our feet on it here. This really kooky opening song sequence of the Will arriving plays out like a weird nightmare. The song being performed by an uncredited June Foray, doing basically what she did for her Witch Hazel characters for Disney and Looney Tunes shorts. This one shot is even very referential to the Disney Silly Symphony short, The Skeleton Dance, as we get a lot of ghouls and goblins unusual for Scooby up until the Scrappy era. Shaggy is super psyched to be in the South, which can't relate, and they get run off the road by a gorilla that's here for some reason. It's there again when they get out to push the car, and their getaway catches the eye of Sheriff Busby, who shares a voice with Jefferson Davis Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard, with a personality similar to his typical partner in antagonism in that series, Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane. The suspicious sheriff warns Shaggy to get out while the gorilla watches, until Busby is informed of a circus train derailing that's left animals like this one running loose. The boys think they're lost until the bushes reveal more road, which Shaggy's ghostly uncle seems to be watching. Then we get one of my favorite parts, the Headless Horseman randomly having a cameo like in Goblin King or that classic episode. Also a random wolf or something. Then dear uncle tells them to go, and as the car gets stuck and with the horseman and wolf on their tail, they're forced into the mansion. Farquaad, the Igor-esque butler, declares himself the rightful owner of the place as well as the family jewels, which Shaggy didn't even know about, and he seems quite happy to let the colonel get rid of them. After a gorilla scare, the sheriff checks in to warn of the animals, and as Farquaad says the ape is a ghost, it certainly found its way in with Scooby. Aw, how many weeks are you? While Shaggy assures the sheriff they're gone, Farquaad's excitement leads him to drop a ring, which Scrappy takes and shows to Shaggy later, including the inscription meant for him. Sadly, before they can go, their car sinks into the ground, so Farquaad sets them up for the night. A ghost candle refuses to go out and clothes start dancing, a hand reaches out and the colonel rides by, proving the night to be a bust, so Scrappy decides to call for help. On the opposite page of our titular Boo Brothers, note the Ghost Breakers with a logo pretty similar to Ghostbusters, a film starring Dan Aykroyd just like the Blues Brothers, which sounds mighty similar to Boo Brothers. They call them up and they come right through the phone as we find they're very obviously based on the Three Stooges, down to Chico's laugh as voiced by the very recognizable Rob Paulson. They do some classic Stooge antics, ultimately destroying some of the mansion. The gorilla is still lurking throughout, just to add filler really, when we get another distraction. Neighbor Sadie Mae Scroggins appears, resembling characters like Daisy Mae of Lil Abner, and might even be named after the Sadie Hawkins Day race from that comic strip, an event where women can chase and marry whichever man they catch, similar to Sadie Mae's desire we'll see to catch and marry Shaggy. She could also have inspiration from Ellie Mae Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies, or strength from Pippi Longstocking, who can say? Not me, I can't say. Dancing with Shaggy ultimately makes her fall for him madly, which does Shaggy no favors with her brother Billy Bob, who reveals their families have been in a feud for decades. Finding himself between either them or his ghostly relative, he jumps inside as Sadie Mae declares intent to marry. The boys check in the freezer and find a hidden diamond, as well as a letter from his uncle with a riddle leading to the treasure, which is overheard. The obvious shadow of whoever it is creeps by as the boys search, and we have to have some more filler between the gorilla and Sadie Mae sexually harassing Shaggy. Scrappy meanwhile solves the riddle, leading them to the next clue, Jewel, and a ghoul, leaving the Boo Brothers to save them. Sort of. The sheriff responds to their earlier calls while Scrappy checks out the next riddle, and the boys hide from gunfire as the sheriff has to respond to another animal call. After the boys trigger the piano from hiding, Scrappy once again figures out the next clue that unlocks a hidden door. Inside, they actually find a sort of creepy ghost that just turns out to be Shriko messing around, and they find the next riddle. Scrappy once again uncovers the grandfather clock to be the next big reveal, and just as he's about to already answer the next riddle immediately, he's puppy napped. Thankfully, he has enough puppy power to fight off Farquaad, though he gets away with the jewel necklace. Someone listens as Scrappy leads them to the attic, immediately finding the next clue as well as a ghost who steals the jewel. While looking at the clue, they hear Farquaad, who seems to have the necklace, which Scrappy carefully takes back. Doesn't last long though, as Shaggy's uncle takes it and the Boo Brothers try fighting him off. Meanwhile, Scrappy reveals their hiding spot is already where they need to go, and Scooby uncovers the next riddle and a cannon scare. Unfortunately, Scrappy tells them the next clue takes them to a headstone, while the same obvious shadow follows. Billy Bob chases them again, further upsets the sheriff, and a ghoul seems to be stalking as well. Scrappy finds Dear Uncle's headstone, which seems to have a loose hat with their prize, but his ghost grabs it all before they can, though thankfully he's no match for puppy power. A ghost traps them, then yelps and runs away, and we see why.
What's on this scroll? Oh, like it's so dark in here. Cut it up, Scoob.
Please tell me why Scooby got turned on and flirted with Shaggy here. They escape and run past the sheriff and start making their way back, while the Scroggins siblings take turns going after Shaggy in a scene that feels like it lasts an eternity even at 2x speed. They read the next clue as the ghost and some more eyes listen, while it seems Farquaad is also present. In the stable, they find the horseman again, but it's a fake, and Sadie Mae nabs Shaggy before they can search the buggy, which now flies out with them in it. Between Shaggy rushing past the sheriff and then the mechanical horse chasing him, you might miss that he knows how to push the button to turn it off somehow, but Shaggy didn't, wondering if he was behind things like the horseman before. Scrappy remembers to check for the next riddle, which turns out to lead exactly where they are, and while gently letting Scrappy down the well, the boys jump in too to avoid gunfire, breaking the rope. Inside, they find a tunnel with the next clue, following to the outside where Dear Uncle is waiting, chasing them into all kinds of traps, but right into the next clue. Back in the mansion, they find the Boo Brothers invited their family over a party, and Shaggy has enough of a backbone to tell them to go. He even tells the brothers to go for being useless, which, I mean, he's Scooby's right. Why are they even here? They give their orphan sob story of wanting enough money to buy a house of their own to haunt, and nothing seems for the boys to let them try again. They're overheard solving the next riddle, then waste more time with Billy Bob and then a bear, finally making it to the next clue. Suddenly their car that sang drives itself into the cave, which Scrappy finds a remote control device on being used by the skeleton ghost. Uncle Ghosty catches up to their car for a narrow escape, and before they can read the next riddle, the ape nabs it, only returning it after Scrappy makes a deal to let him have the mechanical horse. We never see him again after this, never find out if he was returned, recaptured, so I guess he's still out there on that horse even today. Shaggy tries to call the sheriff when the phone is disconnected, and they're followed again as they solve the last clue they need. Shaggy reads the final message, but they're trapped and sent away as the ghost escapes to claim his prize. The Boo brothers save them and rush them back to the house, and the ghost pulls a gun on the boys as the treasure piles out, trapping him under as he loses his gun and is unmasked to reveal the sheriff. Or, as it turns out, the sheriff's brother who's been impersonating him, and is definitely a little too big to fit inside most of the very small costumes he was skulking around in. How did he even do those quick changes so fast? This case seems a little big for one guy. Scooby gets a final scare in with one of the costumes until...
Well, I guess there's no real ghost here after all. Oh, no.
Farquhar, who's surprisingly fine with everything now, which makes no sense at all, serves up a celebratory meal that's already been eaten by the Boo brothers, and Shaggy decides to leave the mansion to them as their own haunting ground to finally have, and are donating the treasure to orphans to make up for the, well, rest of what the plantation likely had going on before. Lastly, Shaggy seems to see his uncle's ghost for real as they leave, and they speed off. That's basically the Boo brothers, and even though I liked it a lot as a kid, it might be my least favorite these days. It's just so long and full of filler and meandering. You could cut it in half and not lose anything. The titular Boo brothers barely do anything of value for most of the movie that it's hard to understand why the movie is even named after them. They're incredibly inconsequential most of the movie. The end also feels to wrap everything up satisfyingly, like why is Farquaad so okay with losing the jewels after he was fighting so hard for them? The Confederate stuff I covered in the Americana video really muddles things in a weird way, and there's just so much that doesn't matter. In relation to that, similar to Farquhar giving up, where did the Scroggins siblings go? Why did Miss Girl randomly just forget about Shaggy and disappear without resolution? Even so, it's still a really nostalgic movie and I like a lot of it too. My criticisms don't mean I don't really enjoy this. Scrappy is perfectly likable and fine here. He might even be the best part as the main character to usually move the story forward without his puppy power gimmick being utilized or even said out loud. I like the atmosphere and villain designs. I just wish it didn't feel so padded out. Also, as an aside, the DVD bonus features are mostly the generic stuff repeated on other Scooby releases, but there is a fun song inspired by the movie edited to some footage.
Cause when ghosts go boo, get on the phone to Scooby-Doo.
Man, like I'm not gonna answer that, Scoob.
What about you? How do you feel about the Boo brothers? I did some polling and it seemed to be the second most popular among viewers, so I know there's some good love for this one, which I fully understand. As for what's easily the most popular, why don't we move on to it in chronological order? Okay, as I said, I held some polls to see which one of these people really loved the most, knowing the answer already, and as expected, it was Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. Although weirdly, from this trailer for the DVD and VHS, you might mistake it for Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School.
Sounds great! Count me in!
It all started when we headed out to coach at a school for girls.
Get a shot of that!
We'll get into what there is to love here in Legacy as we go. Anyway, it starts off as the boys are in a different car now, driving through the rain. We get some really fun fourth wall breaks with the credits.
Zoinks! I can't see a thing through this windshield!
Turns out Shaggy's been hired as a gym teacher at a school, and that's when he should have known something was wrong. I love Scrappy almost dying here and just having fun. They pull up to his school impressed, until they see the sign is not for their stop, and aren't so happy to see Miss Grimwood's next door, where they're meant to be. Scooby is thrown across the moat, picked up by a hand and greeted by a dragon appropriately named Matches as the Miss Grimwood introduces herself. The main attraction, the girls they're teaching show up, like Sabella, Dracula's daughter, resembling a young Elvira. You might also know her voice as Grandma Spankenheimer from Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, and she also might be your first crush. Then Winnie the Werewolf, Elsa Frankenteen, modeled and named after Elsa Lancaster, who played the Bride of Frankenstein in the titular film, Phantasma, voiced by the late Rusty Taylor, aka Minnie Mouse.
Wanna hear me play?
Not bad, Phantasma, but do you know any rock and roll?
And lastly, Tanis the Mummy, named after the Egyptian city. It's giving very big Monster High energy, and it's a shame there's probably no chance we'll ever see a crossover there. Turns out the ghouls want them to train them to beat the cadets at the school from before, Tanis wanting even just one trophy for her mummy case, which Scrappy promises the very excited student body they'll do. Rising the next morning, Scooby accidentally starts teaching ballet, the others joining gracefully as the cadets next door spy. Colonel Calloway chastises them and they lose their ball across the hedge as Matches takes it hostage. Next, the boys take the girls for a jog dog, though enjoying a bite of an apple isn't so tasty when Sabella reveals they grow rotten. After hijinks, the cadets get their ball back at least. The boys try finding anything to eat, but it seems everything that grows here is equally rotten. Shaggy just wants a pizza, so Sabella heads off. Scooby sees some suspicious eyes, but Sabella returns with the creepy pizza, garlic-free, which they still happily eat. And I remember this part always making me hungry as a kid. I wanted this pizza so bad. We then see those eyes belong to the witchy Revolta, our villain, and her grim creeper, hoping to control the ghouls and become all-powerful. While the cadets practice for the volleyball tournament, one of them wearing a crop top, the colonel goes next door, greeted by Sabella, and makes himself not so comfortable before switching seats and trying some fungus fudge, which once again made me so hungry as a kid even if it's rotten, and I wouldn't mind trying the toadstool tea. Miss Grimwood brings the boys down as they arrange the volleyball tournament, and the boys seem to love the fudge, reaffirming how much I want it. The boys teach scarobics next, while the colonel threatens the cadets to make sure they keep the trophy. As time for the match draws near, Scooby falls into the shark-infested moat, and the girls dive in to join him and get some strokes in, being spied upon again as the cadets arrive. Legs pops in to make the net, and Scrappy volunteers as a referee with Scooby cheerleading. The game doesn't go in Grimwood's favor, so the girls start getting tricky, but so do the cadets until Scooby swallows their remote. The mutual tampering continues until Grimwood wins, finally getting Tanis her trophy. Once again, it's time for me to get hungry as Miss Grimwood makes some brownies, while everyone prepares for the Halloween open house with all the monstrous families invited, to the horror of the boys. As the terrifying legends arrive, Revolta seems to find they've gone soft, and while the boys try to escape, they inadvertently run into them. All they want to do is thank the boys though, celebrating their achievement and leading into the Halloween party. I was obsessed with Winnie's juicer here, yet another snack-related thing I wanted. I also love Elsa's shock man. With dawn approaching, they say goodbye, but not without a stern parental warning to take care of the ghouls. Revolta sends her spider bat to take over Shaggy, sneaking in and weaving earphones on to mind control him. He takes the girls on a field trip as instructed the following morning, while the cadets also find themselves lost in the bog. The grim creeper gets Winnie alone and traps her, falling victim to the earphones, and this actually did kind of scare me as a kid. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Miss Grimwood, matches followed them, just as Sabella dives in to save the boys while she's trying to find Winnie. As the cadets are saved themselves, Winnie lures Phantasma in too, and Sabella tries to warn the boys. While the spider bats fight her, Scooby discovers the cabin and is taken, saved only by the arrival of Matches. Sabella tries to warn Elsa and Tanis, but it's too late and the cabin takes off, along with the spider bats finally getting her as well. Scooby explains to the rest, so they hop in the car to follow but get stuck. Thankfully, the Callaway cadets are here, and with some coercion from Matches, push them free. With some puppy power, Scrappy devises a way with Matches for them to get to Revolta's castle, flinging into the mountain as Revolta looks over her new servants. With Scooby's built-in skeleton key, the guys get inside, and despite telling Scooby his mirror reflection is harmless, the evil Shaggy mirror monster inside swaps himself out. Throughout the mirror, Shaggy tries to talk to the girls and discovers the midnight deadline, while evil Shaggy torments Scooby, though they get rid of him with some fiery power from Matches swapping back out. Hiding, Scooby ends up with Revolta and tries to blend in, but gets caught, luring the others with his screams, getting them trapped with the Well Dweller. Matches conveniently can't breathe fire, while the cadets feel guilty and decide to turn back to help. Surprisingly, the guys are able to play ball and walk up the back of the creature, rushing as the girls are being prepared. The evil transformation begins to affect the girls, catching the attention of the cadets, while the boys kick over some of the girls and free them. The cadets are able to help enough for them to free all of the girls, but they agree to finish the transformation to save Froggy, Scooby, and the others. A fight between he and a spider bat ends up ruining the formula though, just in time for Matches to be back to normal, and all the girls to be freed again. A bit messy, but the girls steal the wand, fix Scooby, and destroy it. Unfortunately, it's all so potent that the whole place is about to explode, and Sabella can only fly one person at a time, but the cadets show up to save the day. Despite trying to follow, Revolta doesn't make it far, and everyone makes it home.
Was a snap to escape Revolta's trap. Now let's get loose and dance and clap while I lay on my Scrappy rap.
Ah yes, the movie needed a classic Scrappy rap for our finale dance party with all the families back, as well as the cadets now joining. While Miss Grimwood is thrilled to introduce the new students, the boys decide it's finally time to get out of here, and the girls wave goodbye to their favorite teachers. That's the gist of the Ghoul School, the most loved of this trilogy, and it's no surprise. The movie has quite a bit of filler like Boo Brothers, but even the true filler doesn't feel like a waste of time, because the characters and setting here are just so great. Even the cadets are fun to spend time with, and of course any scene with the ghouls is just fun. I can't believe we aren't regularly seeing them get merchandise. They all have such great personalities and designs, I would watch more of them any chance I could get, and it's shocking they never came back again.
We love you, Enid! No matter what! We love you, girl!
Well, they didn't in Scooby-Doo. In 2018, Cartoon Network series OKKO randomly had an episode be a direct sequel to the film, referencing the events as well as Shaggy and Scooby, with all of the girls returning. Pat Music, Susan Blue, and Rusty Taylor even returned to reprise their roles as Elsa, Sabella, and Phantasma again.
Enid, that's fantastic! So sweet!
So cool!
Oh, Enid, we know.
Tannis and Winnie would now share voices with Bubbles and Buttercup from the Powerpuff Girls reboot, as Tannis' voice actress had long since retired, and Winnie's voice actress Marilyn Schreffler had already passed away. In fact, she was diagnosed with cancer in 1987 after feeling ill, and had to record her performance as Winnie in the film from home due to being so sick that she could no longer travel to the studio. The film would end up being released posthumously, 9 months after she passed away at the age of only 42.
It's a real howl! Now you can have bitter lemonade whenever you want, Papa!
I always loved her unique performance and never knew she was already gone before the film was ever even seen. The actress taking over do a great job at voice matching though, and the returning ladies still sound like a lot of fun. Sadly, it would be the following year we would lose Russie Taylor. I wish we could have gotten more, and this was still pretty random, but cool. It's amazing that it took that long for the characters to return and that we never got more. They're just begging to come back, especially with a dedicated following not unlike the Hex Girls. I don't know anyone that isn't obsessed with the Grimwood Girls, especially my fellow girls and gays. The movie itself does feel a little long, but it's still always entertaining, and I always loved watching my VHS copy as a kid. There's just so much fun to be had with these concepts introduced, which is probably why I've taken to Monster High so much. There's so much I always remember from this one. What about you? Is this your favorite of the trilogy like so many others, or is it maybe number 2, or even 3? And more importantly, who is best girl? Are you a Sabella stan? Or maybe Phantasma? Let's hear it. With that being said, we still have one more film to finish off this trilogy, the one that surprisingly got the least amount of votes in polling, so let's get into it. Depending on who you ask, last but not least, it's Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. This might have been the one I personally watched the most as a kid, so if you're in the camp that loves it, I'm here with you. One thing to note right away is that the film has a big visual difference. The first 2 movies, the first 8 of this 10-film series actually, were animated on cells using film like normal. The last 2 out of the 10, however, including this one, switched over to digital ink and paint, and you can really see the difference. Visually, the vibe is just off, the colors are much more flat, the characters feel placed on top of the backgrounds instead of organic to the environment, the visuals are hazy and not as sharp, and there's a bad halo effect around all the line art that makes it hard to watch. For the latter, I suspect this is worsened by compression on the DVD, as the trailer for the movie features footage that doesn't look nearly as bad. Unfortunately, this is not how the movie itself looks for us today, and we are not expecting any new upgrades from Warner anytime soon. That trailer sure is nostalgic though.
Look for the DVD loaded with extras, like the races on game, a music video, get the picture Scooby-Doo, DVD-ROM games, trailers, and more.
I like that.
Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf.
Only weird thing is transitioning from Don Messick's voice to Scott Innes at the end.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
This movie would actually be the final time Shaggy would wear his red shirt and blue jeans outfit until his gang counterpart wears it in Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase, to better differentiate the two. So this is a proper farewell to this era. Sadly, the other farewell to this era is for Scrappy, as he would never again innocently feature in Scooby media without the asterisk of taking dunks on him after this, at least in TV series and films. Velma would also reference the events in Return to Zombie Island in 2019, but without revealing how she knows about any of this having not been present, just that it's unsolved. Don't know how it counts as that, but sure. That being said, let's get into this caper properly. The movie opens with Shaggy being a race car driver for the first time in his history. I do not know why, with Scooby and Scrappy alongside him. Once again, the car is different from the last 2. He also suddenly has another character at his side, Googie, his girlfriend we've never seen before and will never see again after. She's actually voiced by BJ Ward, who would later voice Velma herself in Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, and Cyber Chase, as well as all the other Scooby media in that period.
His adoring but liberated girlfriend, Googie.
Go, Shaggy, go! Don't be a bust! Leave all the other guys in the dust! Yay, Shaggy!
Her name and color scheme are inspired by Googie architecture of the 40s through the 60s in America. The stuff with sharp corners, geometric shapes, blaring neon colors, you know, this stuff. Think Jetsons, perhaps. I guess it's meant to contrast with Shaggy's thing for cars and racing in the movie. Fun fact that most people already know. You can see William Hanna himself in the audience of this opening scene. The boys basically just pull off some wacky races hijinks, which only get more intense later. Big downside for me as someone that finds race car stuff incredibly snoozeworthy. Anyway, they win. Googie presents their trophy as well as a kiss. Then we cut to Transylvania, Dracula's castle specifically. Throughout, we get some nicely stylized credits, where the big man himself is delivered some bad news via postcard, that the werewolf has retired just before Dracula's big race for Monster of the Year, ruining their plans. Confusingly, this is not the same Dracula from Ghoul School nor any of the other ones we've seen. We also meet his wife, Vampira, who shows off the wonderful prizes to the ghouls. She's inspired both by the character Vampira as well as by Vanna White, hostess of Wheel of Fortune since 1982. The Guinness Book of Records, obviously a spin on the Guinness Book of Records, is pulled out to make a new werewolf, just so happening to be the exact time in 500 years for the transformation to take place.
Shaggy? Shaggy? What kind of a name is Shaggy?
Shaggy might be the most unforgettable line read in history. Vanna finds Shaggy quite cute, so Dracula brings out the Hunch Bunch to fix it, to her horror as well as the others. Voiced by Rob Paulsen returning and regular Fred actor Frank Welker, they accept the job and head off to where the boys are watching a scary movie. Too scary for Scooby. He even gets another scare from them on the way to get more popcorn. Weirdly, even though the dogs normally sleep in the same room at least with Shaggy, if not the same bed, they're forced to sleep outside on the hall rug. Another oddity of this movie's canon. Scrappy describes the prior movie and terrifies Scooby into needing another snack, where he overhears the plan.
Hey, a werewolf? Oh no!
Scooby saves Shaggy as the Hunch Bunch cut a hole for the moon, but just makes Shaggy angry with him again.
We still love you, even if you are a wacko.
Damn, Scrappy. Dracula gets a facial with updates on the progress, and with a threat, they head out the next night. Scooby gets some doggy bonbons before seeing who they came from, and they steal Shaggy away, tossing him into the X that's now been covered up by a watermelon truck, leaving only one more night. Dracula checks in via Transylvanian Zoom, losing his pants in the process, then his boxers. Being a child, I always laughed at this growing up. Shaggy, meanwhile, is taking the dogs on his date with Googie because he's scared to leave Scoob alone now, and Googie ends up being really horny, trying to make the most obvious moves while Shaggy is oblivious. Scooby sees the hunches, so they send the dogs to get snacks while Googie really tries to get Shaggy to loosen up with her. While she warns him not to drink so fast and get hiccups, the hunches put the top down as the moon hits, and with a hiccup he transforms, growls, then transforms back. With his constant back and forth from the hiccups, he pisses off Googie with his growls, so she sends him off for snacks, and he continues to transform over and over, terrifying everyone as he passes. The dogs arrive back but forgot napkins, so Scooby returns while moviegoers report what they saw. Scooby terrified by what he hears as they rush to find the werewolf. Dracula threatens the hunches, getting Shaggy chased all over until Scooby pulls him into his hiding spot. They both get the bad surprise with his hiccups, and Scooby even tries abandoning his friend. Then their baghead plan fails, so they just jump in their car with a terrified Googie as they explain, now chased by the others. Once they think they're safe, the hunches in their helicopter arrive, putting them to sleep and flying them back to Transylvania. Another scene I always liked, they try to open the dome to land, and close the drawbridge instead, fleeing Dracula, who then proceeds to get his face drenched. They then release the car, dropping it on top of him, and as he escapes, the helicopter falls on top of him. To make it worse, as he tells them to spray the 4 awake, he gets his face frosted instead. Great physical humor in this scene. Waking up to monsters, Shaggy's convinced it's a nightmare, and the monsters end up in a fight over who's worse. The witches down to their bloomers, so the makeshift gang try to wake up to no avail.
Don't tell me that's why I got turned into a werewolf.
Precisely.
Oh, I told you not to tell me that.
To convince him to do the race, Drac has Vanna show out the prizes, like a trip to Hawaii, totally disgusting to monsters, or the first prize of a month in the Black Hole of Calcutta, as well as the Monster of the Year trophy. The gang still want to leave, so Drac says sure.
Would I lie? Yeah, sure.
Him teasing food stops Shaggy in his tracks, but the Bat Burgers are a little much. Turns out he did lie when they try to escape and he traps them, though I don't know why Scrappy insists on staying when he could fit through the bars, perhaps in solidarity. From their room, Scrappy has them use the bed sheets to escape, and as they try to find different ways to escape, is it a bad time to say that Werewolf Shaggy was kind of fine? Don't boo me, he's totally crush-worthy. They end up at a party through a tunnel, and the music is actually reused beats from one of the other Superstars movies, Rockin' with Judy Jetson.
That's not my song. I wonder what language he's singing it in.
Dracula offers the frog fudge and spiderweb spaghetti, but before they can dash away, the werewolf romp kicks all of the monsters into dance action.
Rock, 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 rock! Woo! Everybody's rowdy rockins', wearing out their Sunday stockings, doing the werewolf rock.
Shaggy discovers a hidden door which leads to a trap, forcing him to compete or die, and when that doesn't work, Drac promises to change it back if he wins.
No lie? You promise?
Trust.
Drac wakes them up bright and early, showing off his sunblock to let him be out in the day, which is very Dracula from Monster High coded. It offers them tomb service where Shaggy and the rest order a perfect breakfast. This was another scene that always made me super hungry, but it turns out the food was made from beans that make the 3 boys howl, specifically scream beans. Drac shows off the map and lets them leave to check out the course in their car, the Hunch Bunch being sent to torture their trip, but Drac's plan just gets him in trouble. Needing Shaggy to lose, he makes sure their race car is rigged and changed the course again, sending the Hunch Bunch to try and keep him up all night, having to be dragged out of bed the following morning. Googie wakes him up with a kiss, none for Scooby, while she and Scrappy split off in his car to help them in advance, as the monsters all arrive to the track. Drac tries to sabotage Shaggy again,
Let the race begin.
but the chain just tears them down instead. Shaggy fixes the tampering and gets the lead, while Team B warns them of the next attack right off the track, but everyone else ends up out too. Thankfully, Shaggy's car has a giant magnet for some reason that they use to save the boys with, and everyone hits the track.
That hairy hunk Shaggy's way out in front, see?
Hairy hunk!
Harry Hunk is right, like I said. Thanks to Googie, the boys avoid another trap, but the rest aren't so lucky.
Oh, this is terrible! This is awful! Look, Dracky, I broke a nail!
Despite their worst efforts, the Hunches can't stop Shaggy whatsoever, so Drax sends them on a detour to the Schlock Nest monster in the tar pit. Thankfully, their pit crew is on it.
What was that car doing?
Oh, I think it was doing at least 80.
No!
85?
Scrappy has the monster sneeze them out, and the boys head back to the track, easily racing back to the front. When one of them cheats and says anything goes in this race, Shaggy takes advantage and makes a huge leap, temporarily taking out the mummy, but getting shrunken down by the witches and left behind. Good news for them, Scrappy pumps them back up, returning to their lead.
I wish I had a fur. Dracky, honey, will you give me a wrap?
No, you're going to get a rap, all right! Pow! To the moon!
And here we have one of Dracula's random references to Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners he has in this film. Enjoying some pizza, the boys are stopped by Drac posing as a cop, taking their engine, which flies away with him. But fortunately again, Googie and Scrappy fix them up, so Drac sends the Hunches after them instead. Stealing them away, Shaggy has no choice but to turn around, saving them and being sent back with a kiss while they're able to avoid the Hunches now knowing they're after them. Fed up with being unable to stop them, Drac unleashes GK, Genghis Kong, who seems to finally stop the boys until both cars enact Operation Skateboard, letting him loose on the tracks and stopping everyone else. The boys cross the finish line, but Dracula refuses to change Shaggy back still, saying he can't.
Oh, Dracky, that's a monster fib!
Give me that! All right, to the moon! Bang! Zoom!
More Honeymooners references. Scooby steals the book and they run, hopping in their car as Dracula tries to chase in multiple vehicles. With some good luck, they make it free. Home again, Googie looks over the instructions to fix Shaggy, and reciting the incantation finally brings him back to his old self. Later, enjoying a scary movie, Googie warns him not to eat too fast and get the hiccups again in case he still transforms, terrified when she hears a growl, but they realize it came instead from Scooby. Thankfully, it's just a prank and it seems they're finally done with the supernatural.
That's what he thinks. We're back!
And that's the rundown on The Reluctant Werewolf. Gotta say, I still actually enjoy this one. It's still really funny with lots of great humor, especially from Dracula. Googie is a pretty fun character, and Scrappy is mostly at a minimum here for haters of him as well. My favorite character might actually be Vanna Pyra though. I always loved her scenes as a kid, and I still find her to be great now. She has a lot of my favorite lines and scenes, and the performance by Pat Music, who also voiced Elsa Frankenteen in Ghoul School, is so spot on. The setting, like Ghoul School and all the monstrous characters likewise, also leave the movie with quite a bit to work with and play around in. Unfortunately, the movie very much does just go on way too long, with tons of filler like the other two. It gets really tiring with the amount of times Dracula and the Hunch Bunch go after Shaggy over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, etc. Once the race starts halfway in, it really drags and often feels like disconnected episodes instead of a movie, so I can understand why this might be the least popular film of the bunch, especially if you love Scooby-Doo for the mysteries and the moody atmosphere, whereas this one really is mainly a supernatural comedy instead. Very different with how things started back in Where Are You? It's probably not for every Scooby fan. Despite that, it's still such a memorable outing, even getting that Return to Zombie Island shout out not long ago, and definitely not forgettable. I have so many fond memories of watching this one on VHS growing up. It's also kind of funny that Googie is so horny for a very uninterested Shaggy, similar to Velma and Shaggy in season 1 of Mystery Incorporated, and that her voice actor would voice Velma herself a decade later starting in Zombie Island. It's like a proto-Mystery Incorporated.
We're going to change you back from being a werewolf. Repeat after me. Oogly boogly wobbly why. No more a werewolf am I. I'm going to be a normal guy.
What about you? Where do you stand on this movie? Love it, hate it, or just indifferent? What problems do you have with it, or big pluses that you enjoy? With that, let's start getting this mummy wrapped up. Those are all 3 films in this classic 80s TV movie trilogy that have become icons for Scooby fans everywhere. I know there's been a lot of requests for them individually, so hopefully getting them all in one go satisfied every possible ask. Again, I held polls to see general ranking on these, but what's your personal ranking on them? I'm actually not sure myself where I would rank them. It might really depend on my mood, as much as that sounds like a cop-out. I really do love them all for different reasons and have great nostalgia for each. All 3 have the same problem of just being too long at over 90 minutes each. You can tell they're highly padded out with filler to waste time and get them to fit the runtime for TV, which is is probably why the movies made instead for home video later would typically go for 70 to 80 minutes instead. Sometimes a story just can't justify being that long, especially when it feels like there's so many different things happening that you can't keep up. Ghoul School objectively is probably the least plagued by this and justifies its runtime more often than it doesn't, but it's not as if it's free of pacing problems. All around though, with the classic Scooby characters and even some original ones made just for these that became loved, it's easy to see why these continue to be such big favorites as each year goes by. They aren't for everyone, but with 3 of them, there's probably a good chance for at least one that somebody will like. I want to hear about everything you hate, everything you love, why you don't like them, or why they're your favorite, the whole works. I tried not to go too long, so there's probably some things I skipped for time that you might even want to bring up. Let's make sure we get into every crevice. By now I think I've said everything I want to about these myself, so I suppose it's time to pack it up. Like the video if you had any amount of enjoyment looking at these, subscribe for more of whatever this was, follow me on socials if you want, etc. I'll see you next time in Scooby-Topia. Bye!